So, I was talking to my friend the other day about a controversial film from the 70s. He asked why it was controversial, and I said it was because Brooke Shields had a nude scene in it. He got very excited before I told him she was only 12.
I loved you once, I loved you twice, I love you more than beans and rice.
Yeah. Pretty Baby is a 1978 film by French director Louis Malle that takes place in Louisiana during World War I, in the last days of legal prostitution. The setting is the city's red light district of Storyville, and we follow the lives of a group of whores just trying to get through the day. The movie is more of a slice of life, a window into how these women lived.
These are real emeralds. Otherwise, I never would have let them punch those ugly holes in my ears.
A character who features in the film is a man called Ernest J. Bullock, a real-life photographer who became famous for taking his pictures of the prostitutes during the 1910s. But our main character is Violet, a daughter of one of the whores and a girl who has grown up in the brothel.
Peddlers use the back door.
So what is the controversy?
But then you've got to act like it feels good.
I know what to do. Leave me alone.
Halfway through the film, the madam of the brothel decides that Violet is old enough to become a working girl, so her virginity is auctioned off and she has sex, later marrying Bullock when she escapes from the brothel. Did I mention that she's only 12, and that she stays 12 throughout the whole film? Thus it goes down in history as a horrific example of exploitation and child porn disguised as art. Where have we seen this before?
You know, I've missed you terribly.
I haven't missed you.
Lolita is a novel by Vladimir Nabokov, and it's about a middle-aged writer who seduces and abuses his preteen stepdaughter. It's been said that Nabokov wrote the book too well, and it developed a reputation as an instruction manual for paedophilia. The book has Humbert trying to justify his attraction to Dolores by saying that she just looks like a childhood crush of his that died. He defends his rape of her by saying that she seduced him first and that she'd already done things with boys at summer camp.
Well, you haven't even kissed me yet, have you?
A lot of people mistakenly thought that the writer agreed with the character, when the shock and disgust we feel at hearing all of this is what we were meant to be feeling all along. Pretty Baby is very similar to Lolita, not just in terms of its subject matter. The story has a rather blasé tone to what happens to the young girl in order to make the audience feel uncomfortable. The disgust you feel when Violet's virginity is sold, the horror right before she has sex, and general unease about how casual she is towards sex, it's all intentional.
I'm gonna think you're very handsome. And I'm gonna love you up hard and long.
But it's done so subtly the audience doesn't even realise it. And part of this comes down to having a French director.
Hey, you know how to kiss?
Of course I do. Everybody does.
Louis Malle was not officially part of the French New Wave of the 60s, but his films did carry a lot of the same techniques. Particularly the documentary-style shooting, which can be seen in Pretty Baby. At some parts it almost feels like you're watching a documentary. Other characteristics of the New Wave included deconstructions of traditional storytelling, so there's a lack of real narrative resolution in places. And a lot of the films need to be watched twice to really understand the subject matter, just like Lolita needs to be read twice. Louis Malle had never shied away from controversial subject matter before. His films before Pretty Baby tackled suicide, Nazi collaboration, and mother-son incest. Pretty Baby is a fictional story, but the themes it explores come from real life. In today's society, we have laws in place to protect children from adults that would abuse them. Consent laws vary from place to place, but generally the age is from 16 to 18, all to protect children from adults. Lolita digs into these themes, showing that there is a huge power imbalance between a middle-aged man and a teenage girl, no matter how experienced or wise the girl seems to be. And these laws that are there to protect children weren't always around. Child brides and young wives and mothers were depressingly common in the so-called good old days. King Henry VII of England was born to a woman who was only 12 when she gave birth. Romeo and Juliet depicts the historically accurate practice of betrothing Juliet to Paris when she's only 13. The marrying age in Europe was historically between 12 and 14, and in the American colonies it was sadly not uncommon for girls to marry even younger than that. So Pretty Baby having Violet's virginity auctioned off is sadly very rooted in reality.
You should touch him there, you know, like it's accidental.
I know all that.
Violet's backstory as a character is that she was born into the brothel and raised around the whores. So she's been around sex all her life, as have the other children in the brothel.
Nani, you never did it, did you?
Of course I have. Lots of time.
And tell me what it feels like.
When it comes to teaching children about sex, no one can really believe on when the right time is. In my school, we were taught about the ins and outs in biology around the age of 14 to 15. Former child star Mara Wilson said that her mother gave her the talk when she was only 5. That's right, guys, Matilda knew everything. A lot of people have a very idealised view of childhood, seeing it as an innocent, nostalgic time where nothing ever went wrong. The truth is, the world is a scary place to a child because they don't understand it and they're continually forming their worldview. The same is true about sex. Sooner or later, a child is going to learn about it, and it's almost always before the age that the adults think is appropriate. The point of Violet's character is that she's a girl about to become a teenager, and she's never had a normal childhood. She's grown up around sex, whores, drugs, and other things that a child should not be exposed to. The irony of the film's World War I setting is that the war was viewed as a collective end to innocence, or at least a time where people were blissfully unaware of the faraway horrors of the world. But the horror here has been going on for a long time. Hattie was born in a brothel to a whore, and it implies it runs in the family.
My mama was a whore. She had me in a house just like this. Now I'm a whore. I don't know anything except a man lying on top of me, scared to death I'm gonna get the little casino.
Violet has been conditioned to see it as normal, and it's implied that Hattie was too. The movie shows just how twisted an upbringing that would be for a child to endure.
I don't have to explain myself to a child.
I'm not a child.
Pretty Baby doesn't hold the audience's hand through this, but it takes a very subtle and realistic approach to showing how Violet has been affected by growing up in a brothel.
My breasts are very nice. They're nicer than any of the other girls.
Violet has no problem seeing her mother in bed with a client or seeing her get topless photos taken. When she's attacked by a drunk client, Violet just laughs as if it's a game.
Sweet little piece of that. I remember now, Hattie, I remember.
And to cap it off, when the whores kill a man for getting too violent, the focus is instead on Violet playing.
That's about 100.
Take it all. Drop them on Emma Johnson's doorstep.
She has no reaction at all to a man's body being disposed of right behind her. And it implies that she's seen this kind of thing before. She's desensitized to things we'd expect to shield children from. And after this scene, Hattie wants to leave the brothel for good, but Violet doesn't. This is her normal.
Why aren't you packed?
I don't want to go.
So what about the nudity? First of all, I want to clear something up. Violet has sex in the movie, but that is not the nude scene. Violet is never shown having sex on screen. The only time she is shown nude is when Belloc photographs her. To recap the scene, Violet gets photographed by Belloc in the nude. She gets bored at having to wait around all the time and complains about it. The two of them get into a fight, and Violet goes around destroying loads of Belloc's things, so he hits her and then throws her outside. Back in the days of the IMDb boards, there was a big discussion on this film's page about the appropriateness of the nude scene, and I was against it from the start, and I still am, because regardless of context, that's still a 12-year-old actress there. But one user gave a pretty good argument as to why this scene is there. Essentially, the scene is there to show that there is a huge contradiction in Violet and Belloc's dynamic. At this point in the film, she's his wife, and he treats her as such by going to bed with her, kissing her, and photographing her in the nude like he did her mother. But when Violet misbehaves, he treats her like a child by locking her outside. And this ties in with how she's treated in the brothel as well. She's expected to be an adult there, first by doing chores around the house, and then eventually becoming a working girl herself. But when the adults want her to do what they want, she's a child again. There are multiple times that she's slapped for misbehaving or doing things that the adults don't approve of. And there's of course this harrowing scene where she gets whipped just for making passes at a black boy.
It didn't hurt.
This shows a huge dissonance in how they treat her otherwise. She's only a child when it suits them. Belloc even seems to alternate between treating her like a wife and treating her like a daughter.
Why did you buy me a doll?
Every child should have a doll.
Again, to underline that this kind of pairing isn't normal. And the movie does speak about a disturbing trend that you still see today. Sexualizing children as soon as they hit puberty. Stranger Things star Millie Bobby Brown sparked an online debate when she appeared in a flattering evening dress for a premiere. It was split into people commenting on how well she was growing up, or else shaming her for dressing too revealing. Mara Wilson was prompted to write an article reminding people that a 13-year-old girl is not all grown up. Mara herself has said that she once found her name listed on a foot fetish website, got creepy fan mail from adults, and she even found Photoshop porn of herself online. Over in the UK, there was a magazine called The Daily Sport that was known for counting the days down until a model could pose topless on her 16th birthday. After this film, Brooke Shields did The Blue Lagoon and found herself becoming a sex symbol at age 14. On the flip side, you have the much criticised Riverdale storyline involving Archie's affair with Miss Grundy, and the show eventually had to do serious damage control. Pretty Baby shows the extremes this attitude can go to.
Hey, how do we know she is a virgin?
In an all too horrifying and realistic way. The movie actually ends on a somewhat hopeful note, with Hattie now married and able to be respectable.
I told him all about you, Violet, and he insisted that we come and get you.
Ironically, it looks like Violet might have a shot at a normal childhood after all, but it's clear that she's going to be carrying the scars of her upbringing for a very long time. The final shot of the movie shows Violet staring off into space after getting her family photo taken. The first photo she's had taken since the nudity. It's left open whether she'll be okay now that she has a normal family unit, or is it too little too late and has the damage already been done?
But now Mrs. Fuller has overcome her past. She wants the same for Violet.
Pretty Baby is an odd creation, the kind that could only exist during the 70s when anything happened in films anyway. Child nudity all but vanished overnight, and works that portray sexually active teenagers usually have them played by 20-somethings just to be safe. And even knowing the context of the time and the subject matter, I still can't agree with the child nudity. It's kind of ironic that in criticizing the exploitation of children, this film did kind of fall into that same trap anyway. But even with all that, I still think it's a very important story, and the people who just dismiss it as child porn are kind of missing the message.